The question to Ramdas is, how does one find one's part in relieving suffering, one's part in the universe?
Yeah. As you tune yourself to listen more and more carefully to the laws of the universe, you can listen to the laws of the universe by studying physics. You can do it by genetics. You can do it by chemistry, by psychology, by astronomy, astrology. Part of those laws include you. They include how you're manifesting, the laws of your mind, the laws of your body, the laws of the social role, and so on. And as you just adopt that stance of listening more and more, you hear the nature of the flow of forms, including your part in it, so that you end up acting because it is in the same way that a river flows downstream and it comes to a rock and it moves around the rock and then does something else, and it may be going backwards for a moment and then forward. And you listen, and there are moments when you may respond this way, another moment where you may respond that way, and you start to trust yourself being a part of the law, your form being part of the law. That's what's happening. And the more conscious you become, which is also lawful that you would become conscious. I mean, your awakening is part of law too. As you become more conscious, then the nature of which acts you can perform changes. Then that would happen, so that an unconscious being might act towards something one way. As you become more conscious, you will act an entirely different way. Not out of ought or should, just because you listen and that is in the way of things, it feels right. So you start to do things just because you're part of the harmony of the universe, not with this big overlay of what'll I do and I'm doing and I ought and I should, and it's not self-conscious. It's merely, it's a harmony feeling. Is it? Exactly. And each of us is unique. And therefore, what is appropriate for you to do has to do with every single thing that's happened to you in this life and all previous lives, as to which way you will relieve suffering as opposed to which way I will relieve suffering. And as we walk down the street, we are walking down two entirely different streets because of our karmic predicament that affects our perceptions. We're not even seeing the same thing. I mean, the bomb means two different things to each of us because of our associations to bombs and to defense and to security and to feelings, fears of drowning or whatever. You know, all the stuff in our life makes every event. So with money, so with sex, so with achievement, so it's all different for all of us. Each of us has a unique perceptual universe, and as you listen, you hear your part that honors what you need to do. It honors what the total system is about, too. You can't do everything, so you listen to what part you will play in the whole thing.
The question to Ramdas is, how does that affect creating harmony when you're in association with other people who might be working with different perspectives of how things are?
It would be ideal if all of us looked at everything from the perspective of God. Okay? But we happen to be human beings. And we're all looking from a different place. And you finally end up dealing with humans as humans, and you allow them to be who they need to be, and you take that stuff and work with it inside yourself, and you stay as conscious as you can, and you do the best you can. And every time, if people frustrate it or foil it, or don't see or don't share your view, you get to the point where you stop laying trips on other people. You allow them to be who they need to be. And you realize that all you can offer them is an environment of non-judgment through which they can grow as they must grow. Start to give people space. And I get, like, it's the same thing when I was in the Safer Foundation I was telling you about last night. I mean, I disagree with the way these people are doing it. And I'll say, well, I may not want to play in this ballpark anymore. That's my choice. But if I'm going to play in the ballpark, who they are, I must honor. And I'll work with it as best I can. And instead of trying to manipulate and change them, I will just say, if I'm going to play, you must be who you must be, and I must be, and I'll trust that you're doing the best you can. What else am I going to do? Am I dealing with your question or not? the project may or may not happen. The project may or may not happen. Well, you aim towards the project happening, but it may or may not happen. The marriage may not work. The money may not be raised. The good may not be done. The world may not make it because the nations can't transcend their paranoia. And that will be the way of things. What can you do? You do what you can do. You still sing your song. You sing your song even. See, people used to say to me, is the world going to end, or is this new age, is it all just beginning? And I said, people at every lecture, is this Armageddon? What is it? What's happening? Oh, great seer. It's like Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. You have been among us now as you are, tell us, speak to us of the future. And I go, and I said, and I used to worry about what am I supposed to say about these things, and then I began to see it didn't make a hell of a lot of difference. And that sounds bizarre, but I realized that what I had to do at this moment was open my heart, quiet my mind, and do my best to relieve suffering. And that was going to apply whether the world was going to end in 5 minutes or in 2 million years. So that I didn't have to be so preoccupied with the overall scenario. As you point out, I just had to sing my song. I had to just go on and sing my song. Yeah.
The question to Ram Dass is, in dealing with my stuff, I get different messages as to whether it's meditation or counseling or something else that I should be doing. Could you speak about this?
I think you're answering your own question. It has to do with timing. But I think, in general, the important thing is that one acknowledges one's feelings, not necessarily that one acts them out. Because the acting out creates karma. But the acknowledgement of it, it's the denial of it that is what keeps it locked in. But the acknowledgement of it often allows it to transmute it into something else. Because sometimes you can meditate behind it, but very often, like I have done a lot of meditation, but I still found therapy very useful last winter. That therapy just allowed me to acknowledge my feelings and allowed me to open that stuff enough to see the patterns in it. Okay, it was not a beating pillow type therapy, no. Well, from there something starts to release, and I start to see a little more pattern. It's not all over. I mean, I'm still a grade A neurotic, but the qualities of it changes, and the amount I invest in it changes. And there's a quality in which things are really changing in my life. I can feel very deep changes happening in my attitudes towards a lot of very fundamental things in my life. And it's interesting. I mean, if I sit around and say, my God, I'm in my 50s, and it's only now that this is, I've really blown, and stuff. But I don't experience that. I experience just this kind of, it's like my life is experiments with truth, and I can only approach truth so close because of the veils that I've had in life. And then I approach it a little closer, and then certain veils that were locked start to release a little bit, and then a whole new quality comes. And I'm not busy measuring how far I've gotten or how far I have to go. I just can feel process going on. And I stay at the edge of what my capacities are. I don't feel I have to get done. I don't know what done is. There is no done. I mean, I look at the great masters, and they were as neurotic as anybody else. It's merely that their neuroses weren't a preoccupation. Those veils didn't veil anymore, but they were old karma that was still hanging around. I mean, I feel like sometimes something that was, like there were certain neurotic patterns, there were certain patterns in my personality that for years I interpreted psychodynamically as problems. Then as I got more into the spiritual journey, I saw that they weren't problems, they were guidelines that were moving me through life in a certain way. From a spiritual point of view, from my soul's point of view, they were very different than from my personality's point of view. And the nature of the game is that this is a school for the soul, not the personality. See? And if you invest too much in getting your personality all cleaned up, that's just more curriculum stuff. The game is to get free, and the freedom isn't just digging your personality hole deeper and deeper. Your personality, I mean, no matter how liberated I get, probably I'm not going to grow hair. You know, I'm bald, and that's it. So finally, it's nice being bald. Marilyn.
The question to Ram Dass is, we've been at the retreat now for 5 days, and as in past experiences like this, I feel incredibly open and connected to God. How do we maintain this? How do we bring the Spirit back into the world?
Well, I've often felt that part of my function and in going around speaking in communities all the time is not just what I bring, but the fact that I'm a focal point around which people can gather, and then they can meet one another, which allows, when I leave, something to be some connection, all right, because they can see there's more of us than I thought, you know, or she's one of us, I never thought, you know, that kind of thing. And so I've made my intermissions longer and longer in my lectures, I noticed, because I realized the intermission may be the real thing, and the rest of it may just be the cover. And I'm perfectly willing for that to be, you know. I come and have an intermission with Ram Dass. I think that it is extremely useful to have people of like mind to share growth with, to have a meditation group, to have a study group, to have a devotional practice group. It often happens that these groups almost seek out the lowest common denominator, or they get caught in institutional stuff that turns off the living truth of the matter. And I mean, this is just our human condition, that we tend that institutions tend to, like, let's meet every Tuesday. Pretty soon we're all doing it in kind of a mechanical way, and it's no longer living spirit. And I think you owe yourself the truth to demand of situations that they stay living truth, whether it's a relationship, and this is a form of relationship groups. So it's like when I come to a retreat, I really demand that it be living truth. I mean, I demand that I really be here and be in the open space. I'm not trying to treat it like a thing I'm running off. It's something that this is my vehicle for coming to God, being here with you. I'm not coming to God in spite of you or in spite of this. I don't have these categories like, now I'm earning my living, you know. This is it. And now most spiritual traditions honor very much satsang or sangha or the community of beings on the path. And if you can be with people where the spirit stays the dominant theme, and meditation is a very good device for that. I mean, fewer words and fewer games, but more sharing silence, and more sharing like readings, and then silence, things like that. That's a way in which you can keep the quality, keep connecting back. That's why most religions work with a book, like the book, you know. And because the book is the connection, because the people's interpretations of the book just gets into their minds, while the book may be a living connection. Or in church, the Eucharist, or things like that keep a living spirit coming through. I find that a lot of people, once they start to taste of spirit, go back to institutions that previously they found very dead. And when they bring the spirit of their heart into the institution, they see a lot of the rituals come back into life. Like, I've watched a lot of Christians who grew up with the church in a way that really turned them off come and they go to India, or they start to meditate, or they go to a meditation course, and they start to feel this sweetness of spirit. And then they go back and they open the hymn book, and there are words that just blow your mind. I mean, there are words that people wrote in ecstasy, and then they're sung like shopping lists, you know. And you go in and you open the book and you started, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. Oh, wow. And I mean, just suddenly there it is, just incredible levels of this stuff. And everybody's holy, holy, holy. It's really, and it's interesting how you reinvest with the spirit. You can take just very plain forms and reinvest living spirit into them. I get a lot of letters from people who live really like in the backwoods here and there, really by themselves. And I find that when there is a readiness, they can hold on to the spirit without any satsang. I find that it's not necessary in the same way as a guru isn't necessary, but it sure as hell grace to have other people of like mind around. Now, the question of leaving a place like this and coming down, anything that happened to you here that has really happened to you, you are. What do you got to lose? Anything you've just collected, like a picture or a butterfly or something, you're going to lose. It's going to turn into nothing. So my feeling is, try to get rid of everything you got from this as fast as you can, because what's real is left. Bring yourself down as hard as you can. I mean, as you're driving down the road, think of all the horrible things that you can to bring yourself down. And I mean, really, I'm for the hot fire. I'm of the hot fire tradition, not of the let me hold on to my high. I better not call her because she'll bring me down. I'm going to hold on to my high a little longer. Forget it. Go on down. Go down, and you'll come up. And when you're really ready to have the courage to look at your downs, you'll begin to see that in all of it, you're right here, I'm right here. You can hear me saying to you, you here? I'm here. Pretty heavy, isn't it? Yeah, I really lost it. You still here? Yeah. So I think that after you have gone up and down a few times through retreats, and you begin to see that ups and downs are part of the spiritual journey, and that the down is as much process as the up. And the ups that you aren't, but are just something you're grabbing, are what I call cheap highs. They're lovely, but who the hell, you're not going to be able, they're not going to keep you warm on a cold night. And that plus 50 cents will get you on the bus. It's one of those kind of things. So you begin to really reach for the truth that lies behind the highs and the lows. People say, I used to get so high, now nothing's happening in my sadhana. And you and I both can hear that that's a plateau that's a very necessary part of the process. And I say, well, that's an interesting part of the journey, isn't it? You say, well, you mean that's part of the journey? Sure, it's part of the journey. Because you'll go on that plateau until a certain kind of despair or something happens, and that makes you ripe for something else. I mean, sometimes I'm out just living, grabbing material gratification, and I think, oh, how much longer do I have to do this? But I can feel that if I put it away prematurely, it's got me. And I'm just sitting with it until it's cooked, and I'm just going to give it the space. Give it the space. Don't push too fast.
The question to Ram Dass is, in social service, there are often situations when the work does not seem to have God's blessing. The situations don't seem to change, they don't seem to get any lighter. If you're doing something in the right spirit, shouldn't it come together at a certain point? Do you just stay with it in these instances?
Not necessarily. That's a good one. That's a very good question, because I've dealt with those situations. And I have experienced, I do a lot of, there's a lot of seeds that come into my mind to plant in the universe. That's an idea for a program of some sort. And I will go into it with people of like mind and good heart, and then it just keeps running against something. And I can feel that there is a place where I will push, and then I'll say, no, that's not the way. That form isn't the perfect expression of that spirit. And it's like, hold on tightly, let go lightly. And there's a learning, and then other times I'll say, I'll stay with it and push against it and push against it. There are a lot of times when, like when I said about the Seva Foundation, that's a beautiful thing, of beautiful people with beautiful energy, and at the same moment there's something sickly about it. There's something struggly about it. There's something unhealed and unwhole about it. And it's a beautiful thing, and I raise money for it and I support it. At the same moment, I see we have a lot of work to do. And I can't hear yet whether the work means the dissolving of that organization or the seeing it through into something else. And I don't see it's better or worse. Because even if we went for we've gone 3 years, even if we've gone 3 years, which has involved millions of dollars, we've done what we've done, and we've planted seeds, and if we stop at that point, that'll be okay too. And there are other projects which had initial struggles and then slowly went on, and like the Dying Center. We had the Dying Center, and for the first 6 months, nobody came to it. And then the people didn't really want to awaken. They just wanted to get away from their families or things like that. And the neighbors weren't sure they wanted a dying center in the area. And we didn't have any money. And, there were all these hassles, and there was staff crises and crunches. And I thought, well, maybe the whole first part of the year is really for the staff to work on their stuff together, to be ready. And when they're ready, the right people will come. And then very, very slowly the things started to turn around. And the question was how much patience everybody would have. There were a number of times when I thought, well, it's just that experiment isn't going to work. Let's forget it. And then now I see that dying center is becoming a treasure of growth for everybody involved. There's no rule. There's no rule. The rule is you got to keep listening to your heart and saying, I'm still growing through this situation. Because the ultimate investment, the ultimate thing that is the individual human heart, as long as you can use it for your growth, you might stay with it. And the minute you see that I can't go any further with this one, then maybe that's as far as that one will go. There's no rule about it. There are things I walk away from, and there are things I stay with, and I can't for the life of me figure out why I do them. I can't with my rational mind. But intuitively, I'll hang in a little longer. No, I think I'll split. You just got to start to trust that place in yourself, because there is a place in you that is tuned to the totality out of which the situation is arising. And that's not something you can rationally know, because it's not a linear thing. It's a gestalt. It's a total experience. You go with your intuition, your deeper and deeper intuition. I don't know how else to do it. I mean, I think we all hear the situation you're presenting. We've all been in it. And usually when you have invested in something, the inertia of the investment makes you want to keep it going long after it's... And I've learned not to do that. I've learned to not do that.
The question to Ram Dass is, can you say something about the world of good and evil?
If you just keep remembering the triangle of the two and the one, two merging back into the one, and the one giving rise to the two. It goes like 1, 2, 3, many, 5, 7, 9, many, whatever you want to do. And so that every time you get into any kind of the mind is a discriminating instrument, so it's discriminating on the basis of this versus that, always this versus that. And there is a line in the third Chinese patriarch that says, always say just not two, not two, not two, but one, not two, but one. And you keep looking for the one that exists behind the two all the time. You just keep going back. I mean, people say, aren't you afraid of all the dark forces in the world? And I say, how could I be? Because I am connected with God, and I see that the dark forces are merely another face of God. And my focus is with the one. I have no business with the two. The two is part of the manifestation. But the one is what... As long as you focus on the manifestation, there's fear. It's focusing on that which is behind the manifestation that gives you that kind of peace that allows you to play in the world of good and evil. Sure, there's evil, and you end up representing good. But you don't identify with the good against the evil, because that's denying part. And what Emmanuel says is you end up embracing original sin. See, you embrace it all into your being. You see that the dark and the light are merely shadows of each other. And in a lot of the Hindu tradition, it helps, like in the Ramayana, which is the story of Ram and Hanuman and all of the stuff that comes in the tradition of my own lineage. Ram's wife, Ram is God, and Ram's wife is stolen away by Ravana, who is the bad guy. Ravana has 10 heads and 20 arms, and he's a demon, and he's extremely powerful. He's got all the gods scared, and he's got all the people, everybody's scared, because he's very, very heavy-duty ego. He's like Nixon. I mean, he's really heavy-duty ego. And, but it turns out that if you read another part of the book, that Ravana happens to be a very high yogi who is cleaning up his act by taking birth to do that. It's like central casting saying, who wants to play the heavy? You know, who's going to play Lady Macbeth? Okay, I'll play Lady Macbeth, see? And you begin to focus on that in people which is behind the manifestations of good and evil. And so you don't close your heart. And you don't close your heart by just seeing God peeking out through all this stuff, even though you may be in the role where you're going to say, no, you may not, or yes, you may, or I'm going to oppose you, or I'm going to stop you from doing what you're doing. It's still, you have to live in the world of good and evil, but you don't have to identify with it. And by focusing on the one, it frees you from the two. That's the method. It's the line from G. Manley Hall, says, he who knows not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light knows not me. Says God. He who knows not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light knows not me. And I've mixed it up with some very heavy-duty yogis who can do all kinds of mantric zap stuff, and I've crossed them many times. People say, aren't you afraid? Why would I be afraid? I'm protected. God's my protection. And I feel that. I feel that the one, not God, I'll get him for you. It's not that kind of God. It's the oneness of all things, and my resting in that oneness that protects me. So I feel that when that Christ that the entire story of Jesus was a transmission from Spirit to help us see through the veil. And the different beings had to play their part. Pontius Pilate, everybody played their part. Not intentionally, consciously, but they were all playing their part, including Judas. And it's interesting because I was at a Benedictine monastery with a beautiful abbot named Father Damasius, who's died since. And he called me into his room. I had given a speech there, and he called me in his room. He was a German, cherubic-looking, he's a beautiful guy. And he said to me, tell me, what was the meaning of the kiss between Jesus and Judas? And it was interesting, because everybody had to play their part for that story to go down. Yeah, exactly. And at the same moment, you must protect good from evil. But you've got to understand that you need the whole warp and woof of it and all for the process to manifest. There's no manifestation without positive and negative energy, without dark and light. There's no, it's all part of a process. And when you can embrace, that's why Shiva is as much a god as Brahma and Vishnu. That which destroys everything. Because forms just come into existence and they exist for a moment and they destroy. Everything changes all the time. Why be afraid of change? Why afraid of chaos? As long as you're identified with form, this is all very scary. As long as you're identified with good, you're afraid of evil. The minute you're identified with the one, there's good, there's evil. Whole different ballgame. Yeah, sure you can speak of... I'll repeat it. Yeah. Sure. We're talking about Hitler and the Holocaust, and how easy it is to lose, how easy it is to close your heart, how hard it is to keep your heart open, and to understand that somebody can be an instrument of such terrible inhumanity and still be a fellow soul reaching for the light, doing what he thought in his mind he had to do. And as an instrument with your own heart, you do everything you can to stop him and stop such people. But at the same moment, to the extent that you lose your connection with the soul that exists behind it, you are keeping him from becoming free of that incarnation, and you're keeping him caught in the suffering, which keeps that process going. So the game is to see God in each form and to understand the people that went through the Holocaust, the Jews and the non-Jews that were destroyed in that process. It is extraordinarily hard and delicate to even consider the possibility that such beings, from a soul's point of view, were living out a perfect incarnation. Because as long as you and I are afraid of suffering and are afraid of death and are afraid of the total warp and woof of the universe, we can only see darkly. We can only see a certain way. We can't see clearly. We can't see it as God sees it. And it is Emmanuel has helped me a great deal in that. Emmanuel has said it is conceivable that the people in the Holocaust, the souls, agree to come to earth together to make that statement. Look at the resonance of that statement. How do we know what inhumanity might have been perpetuated had it not been for the Holocaust? It's interesting. In terms of how much did that, take a much lesser one, Watergate. How much did the immorality of Watergate focus us on something that affected subsequently the kinds of morality we had? It's interesting what kind of sacrifice was involved in that for the caring of other human beings at a soul level. Now, not at the human level, at the personality level, it stinks and it's horrible, and you wouldn't lay it on anybody, and it's a cruel, vicious thing, and you'll stop it wherever you can. I'm giving you now a soul scenario. But from a soul scenario, everybody's playing their parts, and it's all doing fine. It's just hard when from a personality, because it hurts so bad from a personality level.
The question to Ram Dass is, how do you deal with your own personality stuff, your own fears, insecurities, and intolerance?
Well, I think I have a very definite personality, and I have certain places in me that are closed, that are frightened, that push away things that are threatening. I think I'm human, and I think certainly there are people that I can open to more easily than others. I would like to be wide open to everybody, but that isn't the way it is. And I have learned to allow myself to be that human. And some people won't get anything useful out of me because they can't feel that compassion, because it doesn't come through towards them. That may be some symbiosis of our personalities that doesn't happen. And I just respect that process. I don't feel, I can acknowledge that I think that's true. I think it's true. Now, whatever it is that's my problem is my problem. How you react is your work on yourself. Right? I may be the worst son of a bitch in the world, but that's my problem. Whether you buy it and get caught in it is your problem. See, like all anger, there is what's called dharmic anger, where the Zen monk beats the hell out of his student just out of unbearable love for him. It's true, you see, and it's interesting. And you've got to, now I can What I used to do was when people would say, "What are you getting so angry?" I'd say, "Well, it's out of my compassion, but it was baloney. It was really out of my fear." Okay? And now I'm willing to see that it's both. And that sometimes I am very fierce with somebody because I love them so much and it's the only way it's going to cut through. And they're asking me to do that. And other times it's just because I'm scared and because my ego is very vulnerable. And you've got to know in your heart which it is, because I don't necessarily know either. See, we're dealing with this kind of liquid space in which we're all human and at the same moment divine, and we're going in and out of these planes all the time. Is that dealing with the question?
It seems that we're on the edge of a revolution with technology as far as satellite and cable goes. Do you know of anybody who's doing or planning to do anything about spreading Dharma through the electronic media?
Spreading Dharma through the electronic media. Well, at this moment, I am speaking into a microphone that's going on a tape recorder that will be sold, that will be played on cassettes by people in their cars going to bed. I assume that is what you're talking about. So here I am. Now, what else are you asking?
I mean about,
Big?
an hour a week going out on satellite.
You mean other than Jerry Falwell or something like that? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I considered, actually there's a lot of stuff out. There's a lot of beautiful stuff going out in the airwaves when people pick it up. It may not be in the form of religious things, it may just be but there are a lot of good human beings that share a lot. Sure. And the vehicles, you don't have to be limited to specific vehicles. I thought of doing something like that because I'm getting a little old for traveling around as much as I do. And I thought of doing a weekly show, but I saw in this year of playing in the Hollywood, New York power domains where the money is and the action is for those kinds of things, if you're going to do them that way, that the media is still surrounded because it's got so much power. It attracts power players, and you go through a wall of worldly power to get into that. You're not just handed those airwaves without the reinforcing the cultural values. I'll give you an example. I wanted to do a show in which I just interviewed regular human beings, like a truck driver or a mother or somebody, about the way in which the consciousness or the spirit manifested and the way in which it got lost in daily life. What hangs you up when it wakens you. Just to show people that it's right here all the time. And so a lot of people said, "Ram, that's great, you should do a show, you'd be a natural," and so on. So I ended up with people like the Mary Tyler Moore Productions in Hollywood and stuff like this, and they said, "Oh, that's a great idea, but I'll tell you, people like Jerry Brown and Carly Simon and Jimmy Coburn and people like that. Get them on the show, and then we can get the money." And I said, "Well, don't you see that that's exactly reinforcing that's like reinforcing the People magazine idea of people that are visible and power. That's power reinforcing power. It's people who are valuing a certain kind of power, self-selecting in order to keep reinforcing that. And that's exactly what I didn't want to play. And then I thought, well, I'm being a terrible prima donna. If that's the vehicle to do it, why not? But what I have seen is that I'm not yet pure enough to be able to play the game. That there is a part of me that is very vulnerable to that kind of... I mean, as long as you want to share the Dharma through the media, that want is the card. It's your price. It's your price. And there's where you enter into a contract that stops the Dharma sometimes. So I said, okay, I'm not ready to do this. I'm giving up. I stopped. I had about 8 contacts, and I just gave up. And then last week we did the retreat in Seattle. And this fellow from Del Mar near San Diego contacted us, and he said, "I'd like to video." And he didn't have any money, and I said, "Well, I'll give you $5,000 to sort of put in the pot to see if we could get it going." He arrived at that retreat, which was like this. He arrived with 3 cameras, 6 crew, a mixing unit, very high quality, very, very high quality. Everybody had said to me, you need to do a pilot show. Well, how much will a pilot cost? Well, it'll cost about $50,000. Well, where am I going to get the $50,000? And I was out thinking, I've got to now go hustle rich people to get the money, and I'm not going to do that because I don't want to do that anymore in my life. And here, this crew arrives. They do the most beautiful stuff. Stephen and I were flowing. It was the quality of that retreat was jewel-like. There were times when I hung out with different people by the beach on driftwood, talking all in 3/4-inch beautiful color. The pilot was done. The show was done. This guy, he and his entire crew, their consciousness was transformed by the week there. It's a timing process, and that will go out and out. It's just like our last tapes from Yucca Valley. I heard that they were shown in the Pentagon. Right? There were tapes on dying being shown in the Pentagon. And if we had attempted to get those tapes shown in the Pentagon, we wouldn't have had it. You'd never even think of something as bizarre as that. And yet, when you just trust the process of just doing your purest thing as much as you can, I trust that money will come in as we need it. I trust that the transmission will occur as it must occur. And I hear that people that are in technology will reach out. They want to share Dharma. And it's like people come along and they say, I've got a radio show, would you appear? And I see that each of us plays our part. I don't have to do the radio show. I merely just be my part in it all. So I'm relaxing a lot more about the way that's going to happen. Because I'm not trying to make something happen in the society. I am part of the society, and as it's ready for something to happen, it will happen.